This is the story called The Frequency of Silence. Part 1. The Accidental Archivist. Most people think of silence as an absence, a void where sound used to be. But if you spend enough time in the dark, you realize that silence has a weight. It has a texture. It has a heartbeat. My name is Leo. To the world, I'm just a night shift technician for KPRO 102.7, a radio station perched like a lonely gargoyle 9,000 feet up in the high Sierra Mountains. My job is simple. I watch the green needles jump on the dials. I make sure the midnight jazz feed doesn't drop out. I ensure the valley below has a soundtrack for its dreams. But I have a secret. I don't listen to the music. I listen to the dead air. I've spent years recording the spaces between the stations. The hisses, the pops, the strange, rhythmic hums that the ionosphere produces when the sun hits the other side of the planet. I call them ghost tracks. I thought I was just archiving atmospheric junk. I thought the static was empty. I was wrong. It was Tuesday, March 19th, exactly 2:22 a.m. I remember the time because the digital clock on my desk flickered just as the jazz was cut. It wasn't a fade.
It was a surgical strike.
Silence hit the room like a physical weight. The needles on my console didn't drop to zero. They pinned to the far right, vibrating so hard the glass hummed. I pressed my headphones to my ears, expecting a burst of feedback. Instead, I heard a room that shouldn't exist. I heard the clink of silverware against fine china. I heard the low, polite murmur of a crowd. And I heard a clock, much slower and heavier than mine, ticking.
Tick, tick, tick.
I adjusted the gain, my heart hammering against my ribs. KPRO? This is Leo in the bunker. We've got a major bleed-in. Check the local inputs. No one answered. The station was automated at this hour. I was the only human within 20 miles of snow and granite. Then, the murmuring stopped. Every voice in that invisible room went silent at once. And then, a woman's voice, close enough that I felt the phantom warmth of her breath on my neck, whispered into my headset. Leo, can you hear the difference yet? Part 2, the 1974 paradox. Increase the tension. Shorter, sharper sentences. I didn't report the glitch. In my line of work, you don't talk about voices in the static unless you want your security clearance pulled. Instead, I took the digital recording home. I ran it through a spectral analyzer. I mapped the frequencies. I slowed the audio down by 800%, peeling back the layers of noise like skin from a bone. The murmurs became clear. It wasn't a party. It was a recording of a town hall meeting from 1974. I recognized the names from local history books. They were discussing a geological survey team that had vanished into thin air in these very mountains 50 years ago. But as the tape played, the past began to bleed into my present. A man's voice, scratchy and desperate, spoke directly into the microphone in 1974. Leo says the needles are jumping, the voice said. Leo says the jazz is gone. I stopped the playback. I sat in my dark apartment, staring at the screen.
They were talking about me.
They were talking about what I had done 10 minutes ago in a room that hadn't been built when that recording was made. That's when the edits started. Reality began to glitch. I'd walk into my kitchen and find a coffee cup I'd left stained on the counter was suddenly clean and steaming. I'd look at my shelf, and a book I had never opened was lying on my bed, dog-eared at page 142. I opened the book. Across the margins, in my own jagged handwriting, was a set of GPS coordinates, 36.723 minus 118.504. The mountain wasn't just holding a radio tower. It was holding a loop, and I was the one spinning the reel. Part 3. The Ancient Anchor. Deep, atmospheric tone. Described the surroundings vividly. I hiked through the night. The higher I got, the more the world felt unfinished. The trees looked like blurred shadows. The stars above were static white, unblinking. At the peak, I found it. A tear in the granite. A cave that smelled of ozone and wet wool. As I stepped inside, the freezing mountain wind vanished, replaced by a heavy, vibrating heat that made my teeth ache. I rounded a corner, and stopped. There, in the center of the earth, was a replica of my radio bunker. But this one was ancient. The metal console was rusted orange. The monitors were covered in a layer of gray dust so thick it looked like fur. And sitting on the desk was a digital recorder, exactly like the one in my pocket. I hit play. The voice that came out was mine, but it was weathered, tired. A version of me that had spent decades in the dark. "If you're hearing this, Leo, you've reached the anchor," the older voice said. "The survey team didn't disappear in 1974. They became the signal. They fell into a fold in time, and they've been broadcasting a stop command ever since. They needed a receiver. They needed a physical bridge to the present day. You aren't a man, Leo. You are the receiver. You are a manifestation of the frequency itself." I looked at my hands. In the dim glow of the ancient monitors, I could see right through them. My skin was flickering. I was a ghost clip created by the mountain to finally turn the machine off. Part 4. The final broadcast. Emotional climax. High energy. The cave began to shake. The smooth stone walls started to disintegrate into pixels. The void was coming for the mountain.
I realized the choice I had to make.
If I shut down the signal, the 1974 team would finally be released. The loop would break. The world would go back to normal. But the anchor, the version of me that lived and breathed, would be deleted. I would save the valley. But I would be the ultimate dead air. No one would remember my face. No one would remember my name. I stood at the console of the rusted bunker. I gripped the master gain slider. The high-pitched whine of the transmitter built into a scream that filled the cave. "K-Pro 102.7, I whispered, looking into the void. "This is Leo signing off for the first and last time." I slammed the slider to the top. "Wait 5 seconds in your edit for a massive white static sound." The next morning, a new technician drove up the mountain. She entered the bunker, feeling the warmth of the sun through the glass. The jazz was playing smoothly. She noticed an old book on the desk, opened it to page 142, and found it completely blank. She tossed it in the bin and sat down. Everything was perfect. But as she reached for her coffee, she paused. She looked at the empty corner of the room, feeling like a shadow had just moved. She turned up the volume, and for a heartbeat under the music, she heard it.
Tick, tick, tick.